Hi, friends. This is the Meme Team podcast, where we talk about the logic behind virality, because marketing isn't just logic, it's culture. And this podcast decodes both. Let's talk about the logic behind Astronomer's very temporary spokesperson, Gwyneth Paltrow. It was a pretty incredible piece of marketing.
Yeah, no, I totally loved it. I thought it was hilarious. There were so many levels to it that you're just kind of peeling back everything. A few of the ones that stuck out to me is the fact that it's Gwyneth Paltrow, used to be married to Coldplay's Chris Martin. They famously consciously uncoupled, which is, possibly a reference to the future divorces of the CEO and the CPO's, relationships. And so she was just kind of answering questions that people were submitting about the company and the scandal, but just like really hilariously avoiding it and
Right, by
bringing it
actually
back.
not answering the questions. I
Yeah.
think they showed the questions are like, "What do you think about what happened?" And
Yeah.
she's like, "Oh yeah, what is Astronomer?" And
Yeah.
then gave the dry answers of what this B2B company is.
Yeah. So I thought it was like really funny to bring it back to the company and like the employees and like the product that they're building. Um, and semi addressing, the question because it's like they don't really want to talk about it. And that's not what they want to be known for. So I
Yeah.
thought it was a hilarious way of doing that.
Yeah, I think it was great. I mean, the way that where I'm just really impressed with it is that I just can't really think of a time when I've really seen that a company truly try to leverage this type of earned media or this sensationalism in this way.
Yeah. I have a feeling that it's due to Ryan Reynolds and his company, Maximum Effort, who are the ones that, put it together. I have a feeling that they approached them, were like, hey, wild idea. What do you think if we were to do this in order to like respond to what everybody wants to know? Right? Is like, let's talk about it and just like, flip the script and like actually talk about the company and talk about the product in a way that doesn't make you, shy away from it. I think a lot of companies would just be like, no, we don't want to talk about it. Like, don't even like let's not discuss any of the controversy. Let's just move on. So the fact that
Yeah.
they were able to, make it so humorous and like, talk about it, but in a funny way or address it in a funny way has given them so much more attention than they ever would have gotten, which they probably need because it's going to cost a pretty penny to to pay Gwyneth
Yeah.
Paltrow to be a spokesperson, for
Yeah. And
them.
obviously, they will know how it does for the company itself as a business, right? But I think it's the kind of thing where if this kind of thing were to happen to most brands, I think most brands would be like, "Gee, wow, how do we get a piece of this?" But
Mhm.
I love that they're just going at the gate with, "Okay, let's just try to tie this back to our business and what we do so that hopefully, right, the right customers will find us or they will be more easily able to find us."
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
because everyone's paying attention to them right now, and now even more so because Gwyneth Paltrow. This Gwyneth Paltrow commercial, which, I think was great and, like, funny.
So good. It's too good not to share. I mean, such a great, like, assuming, I would assume it probably cost them at least a couple $100,000. I mean, if you're gonna shoot your shot with that kind of budget, it feels like the right choice.
Yeah, definitely. I also think, like, I wanna call out that this is so outside of what so many other companies have ever done. Obviously, no one has quite fallen into this type of, controversy, but, the fact that they've faced it head on, I feel like isn't really what, crisis PR, comms would have advised. So the fact that they are kind of, playing with it and putting it out there, even like the CEO Pete DeJoy came out and thanked the company and the employees, and then Maximum Effort, he's the one that mentioned that it's Maximum Effort that put this together. So they kind of went about it in a really good way by still calling out to the people that helped them get to this get to where they are now.
Yeah, pretty great. All right, let's move on to our next viral moment. So the viral moment du jour is Sydney Sweeney. So,
Yeah, so Sydney Sweeney and American Eagle,
yep.
they just came out with a new ad that has kind of gone controversial. They basically a campaign with the wordplay on the great genes, Jeans versus Genes, which has kind of triggered some accusations of promoting eugenics and white supremacy, because she's talking about, the heritage of like how genes, make their way down from your parents down to the children, so that people were questioning whether she's talking about being, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white woman with, great genes, and like what that means, for not having great genes, right? So, and then there was the counter backlash on top of it, right? Where critics were saying that this has gone, too woke, it's oversensitive. I didn't think that the whole point of it was to talk about eugenics or white supremacy. I really think that they were just like, playing on blue jeans, the wordplay there. And then also, I think it's like, it's basically copying the, famous or infamous, as the case may be, ad from Calvin Klein and Brooke Shields, which also kind of ended up stirring up its own drama because she was 14 when she, filmed
Yeah,
that
she was
commercial.
a literal child, but being, very much sexualized by the
Yeah,
company. And yeah.
yeah. So, in this commercial, Sydney Sweeney was also kind of being sexualized, right? There's a lot of, camera angles on like her chest and like her boobs, which she's known for, which is also like, one of those things that like, makes me think that it was more about that and not about the whole like white supremacy thing. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Amanda? Whether it was
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think that it was more about American Eagle thinking, hey, how do we get today's hot new it girl wearing our jeans? And Sydney Sweeney is one of today's hot new it girls. I mean, I think it would be different if they chose an unknown, blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman to be a spokesperson. I think that would be different, certainly. But in this case, but she has been like an it girl, right? She's been making famous movies and like she's been hosting SNL. Like
Yeah, yeah,
she's famous, right?
right.
I can see the brand story in this in a legitimate way, which is, I mean, I in high school I wore American Eagle
Mhm,
clothes. Like that was
mhm.
like a store that I went to. I would go there, try to get something on sale. That was something that comes from like my high school. Like I get high school vibes from that. It's been and after high school and college, I felt like I stopped wearing American Eagle. I felt like I didn't see them as I didn't see the stores as often. So just kind of thought that it declined, but it feels like it's back again. So the thing that I wonder is they have kind of a story to tell around like how can we be more evergreen?
Mhm,
Like how can we make sure that our brand stands the test of time and that we're not just a fad?
mhm,
And one way is through an evergreen product like jeans.
mhm.
Like how can we market our one of our best-selling items and show that it's reliable and people should buy it?
Mhm.
I think jeans is totally reasonable. Jeans the pants,
Yeah.
um and it's called American Eagle.
Mhm.
So it's like I can see that if you're really trying to look for it, like, yeah, I think you can find a way to be offended by everything if you try hard enough, or
Mhm.
you can try to find the eugenics message if you want to. But I just don't really think it was that deep. And
No.
the other thing is, I think even if it were, that would indicate some kind of master plan for which this is just the first step of a complex process in which American Eagle will take over the world. I don't, like you would
Yeah.
have to be like, well, okay, well, what would be the end game,
Mhm.
Which is why like I just don't think it's that deep. I think they were just like, oh, let's get that hot girl with the big boobs to talk about our jeans.
Yeah, and I think they were also trying to elevate it the way that they felt the Calvin Klein's jeans, right? Like that was elevated at the time, and it's like this fashion brand that like people still talk about. So I think that that's kind of like the goal that they were aiming for. Another thing too is like if you were trying to go the white supremacist like angle, a lot of what the culture play is happening there is a kind of like a reversion to like old, conservative values, traditional, American like heritage, blah blah blah, all of that, which tends to play more toward like the trad wife, like conservative like clothing and all. And the ad was definitely not conservative, right? Like she's basically showing her boobs and like highlighting her, boobs. And it's just like that message, I think, for me didn't hit the whole like they're trying to go back to like traditional values and like all that, which is kind of where I see white supremacy kind of headed in terms of like the cultural wars. So I really don't think that was the overall intent of that, but I agree, like Amanda said, that you can try to find that if you're looking for it. Let's talk a little bit about like how it did before all of the controversy. So the original post on Instagram got over 1.1 million views. And the stock soared after the announcement, which is not surprising because, like Amanda said, Sydney Sweeney is a current it girl and like people are paying attention to her. It also brings back what happened with the Dr. Squatch soap that she also was a sponsor. Well, it's not a sponsor. What is that?
She was I
An
guess kind of
endorsement?
a brand ambassador, right?
Yeah,
Because
like a brand ambassador.
yeah, it was funny because I actually had to look into it because I was like, did she start her own soap line? But no,
Yeah.
it was Dr. Squatch made a limited edition soap
Mhm.
that used Sydney Sweeney's bathwater. So
Right,
that
right.
was Dr. Squatch's stunt, and Unilever acquired or made an offer to is going to buy Dr. Squatch for $1.5 billion.
Mhm.
It's the Sydney Sweeney effect here.
Right, right. So that's what people are, kind of bringing up. It's like, oh, she's, obviously, choosing particular brands to endorse. In order to have that be part of her portfolio, right? And she's going about it a little differently than a lot of other it girls, right? Like if we bring up Zendaya, who kind of does more of like the luxury retailers and like brands, she seems to be going for more of like the accessible brands that like you can you as a regular person can get, right? Because American Eagle is pretty it's not cheap, but it's a little bit more accessible than a lot of the bigger brands. So that seems to be more of like with the type of brand that she's creating for herself, of being a little bit more accessible for both like women, but then also creating soap. I assume it was mostly men that bought the soap and not women.
Yeah, yeah, because
So
Dr. Squatch they mostly make anybody can buy their products, right? But I
sure.
think it's generally grooming products aimed towards men.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It seems to be the whole girls want to be her, men want to be with her type of
Yeah.
brand that she's creating for herself. And she does that by getting sponsoring brands that are a little bit more accessible to her. So that's why this made sense to me. And if you'll remember, it's two different ad spots, right? So there's the one that's like, going down as she's wearing like the jean jacket that is also part of. So it's two products she has worked with American Eagle to create. There's the jean jacket and then the pants. And it has like a butterfly on it because it's supposed to be in support of domestic violence victims. But the two ads, right? One is with like the jean jacket and it's like going down like her front and it's showing like her boobs and then she's like, eyes up here. And then the other one, which is the one that like, has caused more of the controversy, is where she's like lying down and she starts talking about, the, parents passing down the genes to their children. So the fact that it's both of those ads together, I think also, um, goes with the argument that it wasn't the intention for it to be about white supremacy and eugenics. But here we are. I think it's the
Here
fact
we
that
are.
we're in this cultural, and political, war, it's not a war, but it's kind of the times that we're in, which kind of makes it overall a little bit more annoying that we're even having to have this conversation. Another point to like my argument that I don't think that that was the intent is the fact that American Eagle hasn't really come out to address the controversy one way or another. They're kind of keeping quiet, which, honestly, that's probably the best way that they can go about it, because since it wasn't their intent to come out and, apologize for it, I think would end up making it worse for them. Um, and if it was their intent, that's not really something you want to admit to, right? Them keeping quiet kind of makes sense as they kind of, just go through it. One way that they did seem, or people are kind of, pointing at is that they just came out with another ad that has a different model, and people are kind of calling it damage control, which, one way or the other, they're not just going to use Sydney Sweeney to promote everything, right? She's only got those two items. They were always going to revert back to other models and like the rest of the clothes that they're promoting. So I think that, kind of makes sense. But I think that's one of the things now that brands kind of have to be keeping an eye out for, whether it is intentional or not. You don't want to get caught between, progressive criticism and or conservative criticism, and either way to make it seem as if you're playing one way or the other, because that's just, most brands don't want to wade into that territory, and they shouldn't, right? Like everything shouldn't be some type of like culture war. And the fact that, it did get to this point, I think says more about, the rest of us and society and where we're at and everything than like the actual product itself.
Yeah. By the way, I want to add to regarding the jeans ad is the pants themselves.
Mhm.
When she's saying, talking about like jeans getting passed down through your parents, I think where there's another sort of wordplay there, it's the fact that so many elder millennials and maybe even Gen Xers wore these jeans when we were teenagers. And we are all old enough where we could be literally passing down our American Eagle jeans to our preteen or teenage kids. So like that's actually very fathomable.
Mhm.
And I'm talking about literal jean pants.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, if you think about it, one of the things that oftentimes I hear like millennials talk about is the fact that the clothes that they used to wear back when they were growing up lasted so much longer and was a better quality. So to think about like having kept those jeans, right, that you originally bought from American Eagle or Abercrombie or Hollister, all those companies, and to still have them now, and that they're all kind of coming back, like the styles that we used to wear back then are now essentially coming back again.
Yeah. I kind
Um,
of think that's more
right,
so what they're referencing. That's what
right,
I
right, right.
think.
Yeah, but maybe that's a thing that they now have to make a little bit more obvious,
Yeah.
It does kind of like talk to one of the things that I've been hearing, which is kind of interesting in terms of just like culturally where we're at, is how many more things have to be spelled out a little bit
Mm.
more clearly, because and I don't want to blame Gen Z because they don't know how to read or whatever, but like they're just used to seeing things or being told things a little bit more than like we used to be, back then.
Well,
One
yeah,
of
because
those ways.
basically every video on TikTok is breaking down something else.
Mhm.
I mean, all the content you see nowadays, like, here's my reaction to this thing.
Right.
Here's what this thing means, and it's
Mhm.
very explicit of this is what to think about this scene in this movie,
Mhm.
And sometimes it's interesting or it's helpful when you're trying to decode more ambiguous or even, it's purposefully ambiguous
Mhm.
content, like the end of what's that movie? Like the end of Inception, right? Like
Inception, yeah.
like there are all kinds of reaction videos and
Mhm.
interpretations of that. But, you know, anyway, that's kind of a digression, but I just wanted to make
No,
the
but
point
I
that
think it's like part of the it's
yeah,
not the problem, but part
yeah, but
of
it's
what's
part of it.
happening, right? Where it's like even now where it's like we joke about how with like Netflix movies, they're like putting everything in there and in
Hmm.
the subtitles and saying having the characters say exactly what's happening
Yeah.
because people can't infer things anymore. So
Yeah.
maybe
Oh,
I think that's part of the thing.
we should call out, by the way, that I was trying to figure out where the controversy originated, and I think it originated on TikTok and X,
Mhm.
platforms where people are often explaining things to other
Mhm.
people. And it does make me wonder if whatever
And being
original TikTok
controversial for
video,
likes.
yeah, or yeah, it makes me wonder where if whatever original TikTok video it was where the person said it was about white supremacy and eugenics, makes me wonder how many people really legitimately thought that before that person brought it up. And But, like, you know, like
I mean, I
wondered,
think it shows
and
because
yeah,
initially the stock price went up. It went viral by itself as just like the video because I mean,
yeah.
she was showing her
It's
boobs, I
Sydney
think,
Sweeney,
and
yeah.
it's Sydney Sweeney. But it wasn't until after that it all kind of grew. And I think you were mentioning earlier that you think, bots were kind of involved in like
I
it, right?
wonder, and, like, I don't know there's any way to know, especially because bots are so sophisticated now, and a lot of social networks themselves are having a hard time, weeding them out, but I wonder, right? Because on TikTok, like, do we know how many users are actual users versus bots?
Hmm.
On Twitter/X,
Same.
this was at 3 years ago at Sparktorial when we ran our analysis of how many accounts were bots, basically bots or inactive accounts or spam. And we at the time found that it was probably close to 20%. And then
That's
now,
wild.
and over the past year or so, there are other sources that peg that number as closer to 60%. And so imagine if close to 60% of X users are bots. Then it comes to like, okay, so how many people really did think
Hmm.
this about the ad? And I don't know, right?
Right. Right, right, right. Yeah, and I think a thing to always remember is that a lot of people, in order to get those like Twitter payouts, right? You say controversial things and you have people like kind of jump on and then that gets them money. So, you're being incentivized to be controversial.
Hmm.
And how do you do that? It's by, bringing up white supremacy and like eugenics, and, talking about that. And understand that like there are some, other things happening politically and culturally that, are bringing up the topics overall, but to try to pin everything to that kind of makes it so that like less people pay attention to the noise for like when it's really happening, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I worry about that.
Hmm.
What I am also seeing is a lot of people saying something similar of like, this is all just a distraction.
Hmm.
Like who cares about this? I am the bigger prize here, friends.
Yeah,
We got to
exactly.
unseal those Epstein files, like,
Yeah, right.
and they should. All right, let's get to our next topic. So I wanted to talk about this new report from Muckrack over last week. It was Muckrack. Well, I saw this on Axios Communicators. But this Muckrack report found that news stories or content generated by external sources like journalists, influencers, customers, right? These are the top sources for AI bots like ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. So really, what's interesting is that premium publishers are unexpectedly winning in AI search while content mills lose relevance. That's kind of what we want, right?
Yeah, amazing.
Like, wait, that's what we wanted this whole
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
time.
And it runs counter to what everybody has been saying. AI is going to ruin everything because now everything's going to be the same. And like, it's just going to
Yeah.
be AI slop all the way down, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I my hope with that though was that because there would be more AI slop, that there would be more forcing functions to truly weed out what's good.
Hmm.
And I do think it's interesting that that these LLMs are some of the ones that are trying to weed it out. And it seems like I think what's also interesting here is that it's like we're coming full circle with respect to marketing, where with this advent of new technology, the LLMs, we're
Hmm.
seeing that there's probably now a bigger need than ever to focus on some of the classic marketing efforts like brand awareness and of course PR or earned media. So the things that perform that LLMs tend to cite, right, are like news sources, also YouTube, but because if that YouTube video has a transcript of something, then that's going to be easily crawled, right? So the Milk Rock report pointed out like podcasts. If the podcasts have a transcript that's published online, that's also going to be more likely to get cited. So I think
So we
this,
need to start publishing the transcripts to our podcast.
or that, or we need to at least enable, which I think we do.
Yeah,
We need to
yeah,
enable YouTube to auto generate
yeah.
transcripts, and that should be fine.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I think what's cool about this is that it gives some clues as to how you can try to get earned media in today's new technology landscape.
Yeah. I think one of the things that was like really stuck out to me is how we're kind of going full circle into like what SEO and like keywords like mean and like what you should be focusing on. Yes. But then also how you and like your unique perspective into, bringing ideas together, whether, through through a podcast or through thought leadership, within your own industry, or bringing, industries together. Your unique perspective is now the biggest differentiator that you can have, because nobody else is going to be able to think about the things that you think about, if they don't have your experience or background, right? And even if you have, similar backgrounds, like I mentioned, I just tweeted about this because it's been happening to me, where it's like Amanda and I, we're both marketers, we're in tech and startups, at small companies, and we each do our own posts for the podcast, and she always comes up with completely different things than like what I talk about, right? And so it's showing that like you can have all these like similarities, but then when you talk about it or you post about it, that's where like your knowledge and experience really comes out. So if now all of that content is being trawled by the LLMs, that unique insight that you have is going to start rising to the top, which I think should excite everybody. And, all us marketers who like, constantly are in the weeds about like how we can talk about our company and the product and like what makes us unique. Like now's the time to be bringing those like founder stories to the front, those customer stories, the testimonials, like what your product does that's unique compared to like competitors, right? And like the more that like you can make them as unique as possible, and like having those like unique insights, the better that it's going to work out for you, because nobody else is going to be able to talk that way about like, a different product, right? So that's your new competition. It's like, how do you get ranked for all these things?
Yeah.
Is the one thing. The other thing that I've been thinking about too is like, how does this then convert to like a press strategy that you can kind of create, right? Because we're talking about, earned media here, but like, how do you then get attention from like the regular media, which is also getting their numbers like boosted up because they're talking about, unique things, but then also have that like, foundational layer of like being more trusted because they're like, news sources or whatever. So like, one of the ways that I've started thinking about this more is really looking at those like local newspapers that talk to a more like a smaller segment of like a narrow consumer, city-wise, but then also like trade publications, smaller podcasts, like Substacks that are really narrow in like their focus, in order for you to kind of get mentioned in other like media that's not just like your own like SEO and like keyword strategy, but then also giving them new content to like write about. So coming at them with like trends and analysis that like from like your founder or like from you that you're noticing from like data that you have, or like a unique customer story of like how a specific consumer is like using your product that's like unique to like everything else out there. So really thinking about those things, and then kind of forming those relationships with like journalists and like writers in order to kind of get mentioned, and start appearing in the press some way.
Yeah, I think it's becoming more important than ever, and now this is a really good case for it to think about to think less about, oh, how can I get people to click on my website, or how can I, boost impressions on this website, and more about how can I get influential people or entities to talk about us. And so that has to result in you leveling up your game in a way that maybe you hadn't thought of before. And it might be those things like doing more targeted or like just really hyper specific outreach to trade publications, industry publications, offering comment on these things. Could even just be as simple as trying to form and warm these relationships with media, right? Like maybe reaching out to a reporter who would cover your industry and say like, "Hey, I saw your news article on this thing. I like this coverage. By the way, I talk about this niche side of it. If you ever need someone to talk to, like if you need a quote, like happy to be in your network." I think there's something to be said for doing that type of I don't know what to call that. I'm sure there's a PR term for it, but that type of lukewarm pitch, so to speak.
Yeah, I've been seeing more journalists post about that where they're like, I save emails where it's like I might not use it at the moment, but I like have it referenced for like in the future if I'm looking for, this angle or, I want to quote in this for this topic, they'll remember that. So
Yeah.
you have to think about, the media strategy as a long-term thing. It's not just, hey, we're announcing our raise and let's get that out there. It's like, no, these new product lines that we're launching, here's like what they do for people and like what like the customer solution is. And then also like the things that like your founder can speak to that like a unique insight that they have that they've noticed, that's tying like a couple of things together. Just really thinking about that as a like brand strategy in order to like talk about your company and like what's uniquely, yours.
So we could talk about some success metrics, how you track success when you are trying to get mentioned by the LLMs. I mean, we should look at what our friends in PR already track, right? You can look at things like, and I'm saying this for people who might not be in the world of PR, right? So this you could be tracking things like overall brand sentiment, like what like are people kind of generally speaking positively about your brand? There's that. You could track share of voice. So like of the things that you or your company are saying, how much of that is getting airtime, so to speak. You could even just look at all the other kinds of look at engagement more holistically. Like, are people talking about you? Are people commenting on your stuff on social? Are people talking about your industry at large? Like those things are all important. And then finally, also just really trying to break out your types of outreach or the way you're trying to get PR through different tiers. Like not everyone is going to just get mentioned in the Wall Street Journal right away, right? You have to kind of work your way up. So really it's just being very mindful about what what are the influential publications or influential outlets to the Wall Street Journal? Like how can I get mentioned in the niche or trade publications that could then ultimately create the path for me to be mentioned in the Wall Street Journal?
Yeah, definitely. One thing I want to follow up with that is sponsored content and like all those, advertorials and native advertising, the way that they, market these ways to, be featured in their magazines, but not on the editorial side. They were shown to not be pulled in by LLMs. So it's time to start avoiding those. It kind of sucks because on the one hand, like that's a way that a lot of these like publications are making revenue.
Mm.
But now that we know that they're not effective and that no one's looking at them, I mean, we all kind of had an inkling, right? Like most people are like, oh, SpawnCon, like, but companies still pay for it. It's been kind of a PR strategy that it's been recommended, especially if it can like look less like an ad. And we see them in magazines all the time, but it's just not effective anymore. So it's kind of time to start cutting back on those and really trying to do a more of a organic type of like reaching out to like the editors on like stories and like really keeping track of like what they're talking about and like is there a specific angle that you can kind of put a twist on so that you can get mentioned, or like a future trend that you're seeing in order to pitch directly to the editorial side of publications in order to start getting a little bit more PR that way.
Yeah, that's a great call out.
Mhm.
All right.
Cool. So let's talk about marketing topic number 3. So this is another, feature that we saw in Adweek, that AI skills, where they're kind of seeing the growth happening. Curiously, it's been growing in government most, and then healthcare, and then like marketing and advertising is kind of in the middle, in between, healthcare, government, and tech, which is curious, I thought. One of the things, though, I wonder is that, AI has kind of been around for a little bit. So I do wonder if like a lot of marketers and like people in advertising have already been in AI and that now, they're because they're talking about about growth, like how much more it's been growing in this past year. So LinkedIn ran this survey, and they're the ones that published the data. The government has seen 28% growth, and then marketing is at 12%. So from what kind of just, anecdotally, I know that a lot more like marketing folks are using AI or have been amenable to it in any case. So there wouldn't necessarily be as much growth shown here. And so they're showing that AI strategy skills is like 189%. So that's where they're seeing like most of the where people are thinking that like that's the trajectory of like what is AI strategy and how are we incorporating it into our company and like using it in order to grow our skills. Prompt engineering, which is figuring out how you're getting the LLM to like answer the question for you. That's gone on 79%. And they're showing that junior roles have been hit the hardest while management stays steady. Recruiters are noting that younger talent is naturally a little bit more AI fluent, which, makes sense. They're the ones that are like, learning more of the things and like skills. So one of the things I want to call out here is early marketing roles have changed, right? Like it used to be that you're kind of just, coming on as a junior and you're like learning pretty much everything along the way. That's kind of how I came up, right? Like I moved into a marketing role, started in social media and then grew into like an email marketing role. So kind of, tried a little bit of everything, but I learned on the job, right? That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Companies these days just really seem to want people to already have skills as they're going in. So don't just assume that you're going to get taught things. Now you just have to be, taking that on a little bit more for yourself. And what does that mean? It means that you can't just use ChatGPT and Midjourney, trying it out. Like now you have to kind of start thinking about the strategy behind it, like strategically about how you're going to implement AI into like your work and beyond, right? So one of the things that is being called out here is that a lot of the younger demographics who like know AI are able to teach their higher ups and superiors a little bit more about AI and like teach them like, hey, have you thought about us using AI in this way? Or like, how about, we try AI, on this part of our, business plan or strategy. So that's making them kind of separate themselves from, everybody else. So it gives you a one up in terms of like what you're providing, that it's not just, you're there to like learn, but you're also offering like new perspectives. So, take advantage of that, like start learning how you can incorporate AI into like your own process and like flow, and then like how others can like use it. Whether that's like teaching them how to do it or like, coming up with like the rules or kind of like the process behind being able to use it going forward. Another thing is that, you have to think about that this whole idea of being like fluent in AI is only going to be like a thing that is, like for the next 2 to 3 years before, everybody else starts catching up. So like that's something that you just have to start incorporating into the way that you're doing things in order to separate yourself from everybody now. And like I said, using it as a way to teach more senior people how they can do things in order for them to start relying on you, to own things and, own AI strategy or own AI incorporation at your company.
I think the bigger takeaway is, well, what can I do or what can I hone that AI can't replace as easily? And I think if we think about how AI is often used, well, is now used as a tool to make existing marketers, and I'm saying marketers because that's our industry, not because only marketers use it, which obviously we know is not the case. It's, that now the savvier marketers are incorporating AI into their workflow. And so that's already a cohort of people who are already savvy, who are presumably already talented, who are now adding on this additional tool that makes them better at their jobs. So I think something that's really important is, what are the skills you need to build up to be savvy? And then second to that is, how do you then incorporate AI into a workflow where it makes sense for you and for your business? So I think one of the most important skills that somebody can hone now, whether you are young or old, whatever wherever you are in the workforce, is some sense of taste,
Mm.
like a good sense of curation. Like, how do you know what information is good and what isn't good? How do you know what kind of writing will resonate with your customer? How do you, like the things like that that you can't really outsource to AI because AI is just going to tell you what it is based on a series of what's statistically likely to be. It can't really tell you how to think. Only you would know how to think. And if you know how to think well, then it becomes a tool that ideally that you would use to be better at your job.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to think about it as when I was coming up, social media wasn't a thing, right? I mean, it was a thing in terms of like, hey, we're all on, Facebook, and have you heard about, Twitter and all that. But the whole idea of a social media marketing strategy, like that didn't become a thing. Like I was like the first at my company when I first came up to start using it as a strategy, right? So it was like that became my differentiator, right? Where it's just like, oh, I know social media and I know how to like, use it to talk to people and like engage with consumers. So that's kind of like how I see AI. But so it's like you use it as a way to grow like your own skills in whatever you're interested in at the time, right? Like this doesn't have to be like just go learn AI. Like it's not about that. It's like, well, what aspects of AI interest you the most, right? Because it's not the same for everybody. And not every type of AI is going to be useful for every type of company, right? You have to go kind of figure that out, right? But I think I agree with Amanda where having a baseline of like being able to write, knowing how to think, knowing how to critically think, like those are the things that are also going to like matter a lot. And AI can't really do that for you, right? That's kind of what we were talking about earlier, where everything kind of like reverts to the mean, or like people can't infer and people can't, make connections, or it's like you have to be told what to do. Like that's not really going to like help you to empathize with like your potential customer, which I think is like super useful for marketers. It's like, how do you figure out like what your customer wants and how they want it? That's kind of like things that you're learning as you're going. One other thing, to call out here is that as someone who is older, is not like junior. A lot of companies have professional development budgets, so maybe think about using that to learn AI training in order to use the benefit, and then try to add more skills to like to what you're doing. It's one way that we're kind of seeing companies like not provide raises, like monetary raises, but this is another way that maybe you can like ask them to give you a budget to like spend to this, that then you take to your like next job that is willing to give you more money to do, but you'll at least have a bit more skills to like put yourself out there. If you are interested in AI, I think this is also helpful for you to start finding companies that you want to work at, or the companies that are positioning themselves as being AI first, or that have shown that they're interested in implementing AI into the company. Because not all companies want that right now. Though, I mean, that could be another thing you also pitch yourself as, right? For the companies that aren't quite, implementing it right now, that could be a way that you kind of differentiate yourself. Like say like, oh, I can, I've learned how to use AI to do this and would love to like, use it to bring up the whole company. But a little bit more opportunities as people are looking for ways to market themselves to companies to get hired.
All right. I think we also have a lot to cover in terms of media stuff. So Sonia and I were thinking for this week that we would do this sort of media wrap up where we talk about, well, all what's going on in the worlds of movies, telecoms, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to bring up is this nostalgia marketing roundup that I've noticed in a few movie premieres that have come out. So we have Freaky Friday. Lindsay Lohan and crew are doing the movie premiere that I think is coming out this week. I saw that they're incorporating a lot of like Parent Trap elements to it. So they had Chessie and Meredith, like the actresses that play them, show up at the premiere, which I thought was really fun. And then we also have Lindsay Lohan dressed or like the clothing she's wearing is referencing some of her Parent Trap outfits, which is kind of funny. And then they, came out with I think they did, it was like a band show for like Pink Slip, which is the band in the movie. And she's wearing like a pink slip shirt. So just really tying it all in together to like referencing all the stuff that like when you first saw the original Freaky Friday and Parent Trap, you kind of like remember all those things. And that also came up with the Fantastic Four premiere. I think it was the one in New York where they had the previous cast members for the previous Fantastic Fours come out, and they were invited to the premiere, and they had their photos there. So I thought it was like a nice way to kind of like incorporate all the folks that have like participated in the franchise or the previous franchises, and like include them in like the newer version that's like coming out as well.
Yeah, that's fun. I think I bet people are really gonna like the Freaky Friday revival.
Yeah. It's funny that like it was meant, referencing Parent Trap, right? Because it's just tying in, Lindsay Lohan's, previous, work and like, her coworkers, as I was calling them, because, from the movie. So it's like kind of tying in like all these things that, one could say it's like, it doesn't really have to do with the movie, aside from the fact that, Lindsay Lohan starred in both of the movies. And it's these things that it's a similar audience, right? Like, the people who watch the Parent Trap are probably the ones who are also most likely to go watch, the Freaky Friday sequel, who are also the folks that, saw the original Freaky Friday. So I thought it was a nice way to kind of tie it all together. And it kind of activates, across, platform, everything that kind of is calling back to this nostalgia. So the premiere stunts, the outfit callbacks, music reunions, it all is just like one thing that's like, referencing all of like Lindsay Lohan's work, which I thought was pretty cool.
Cool. And then also over the past weekend, the Happy Gilmore 2 premiered on Netflix. That was a lot of fun. I love the first movie when it had come out, so it's nostalgic for me. I thought it was a lot of fun. But they also did a bunch of marketing activations that I thought were pretty cool and worth mentioning. So for one, Spotify launched an in-app promotional game, the Happy Gilmore 2 tournament, where you tilt your phone to make golf swings. You can unlock film audio clips, theme playlists, stuff like that. And Subway also brought back its limited Happy Gilmore meal, which includes some collectible character cups. There are some QR codes linking to an interactive hub. And yeah, I mean, they also did a bunch of live or experiential stuff. Like there was, Netflix staged an in-character appearance by Shooter McGavin at the at the WM Phoenix Open Golf Tournament. So there's just
funny. It makes sense because the WM one is supposed to be like the funnest, like, and most laid back golf tournament that's out there. I learned this from the Netflix show. So it's cool that they kind of have that. I also saw that Scotty Scheffler showed up in the movie, who's like
he's in it. Rory McIlroy is in it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then the movie itself just has a ton of cameos from the golf community, but also, the usual celebrities. So it's overall, I thought it was a really fun movie. They clearly had a lot of fun with the production of it, but also now the marketing of it. And yeah, I mean, like do I think it's a very deep work of art? No,
but neither was Happy Gilmore.
Yeah, right. No, exactly. So like, I think what I've seen, if anyone doesn't like it, like I've been saying, if you went out of your way to watch Happy Gilmore 2 and you didn't like it, I think that says more about you than Happy Gilmore, in the sense that, what did you expect? Like the movies, I thought it was exactly what I would have wanted it to be or would have thought it would be. So
yeah, especially as a fan, right? Like,
yeah, totally. And also, like, if you're gonna say like, oh, it's not my kind of humor or it's not my thing, that's totally defensible. But what I'm saying more so is like, if it isn't your thing, why would you watch it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's I was telling Amanda that it's not really my humor.
Yeah.
And she's right. I am not gonna go watch it, you know?
Yeah, don't.
That's the thing, right? Like, why would I watch it when I know it's like it's not really in my realm of like movies that I like watching, you know? But
Totally.
it sounds like Amanda really enjoyed it. So that's no, but that's the whole thing, right? It's like
Yeah.
Amanda was a fan of the original movie and like knew what to expect. So I agree that like if you're kind of going into it expecting, you know, a good, you know, I don't know, like an Oscar worthy movie, like that's not what this is, right? And that does
Right.
say more about you.
Totally. If you're looking for like, oh, is this a new groundbreaking genre of comedy? No, it's not.
Mhm.
It's a trip down memory lane with a couple of fresh things.
Yeah. There you go. Um, Well, cool. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that we're seeing, they just announced that F1 will be back in IMAX in August, which I think is really funny because this is after we hear that Sinners is going to come back as well on IMAX. So I'm starting to see this as a new avenue for movie theaters, especially, you know, IMAX theaters to, you know, be bringing back some of the most popular movies during what's essentially like a dead month, right? Like August isn't the most popular, you know, month for movies, and for like movie premieres. So the fact that they're using it to like host, you know, some of the movies that have been most popular this year is really smart of them to like, you know, try to bring back additional money. And I saw that this
Yeah.
was also a thing that we mentioned when we were talking about Tom Cruise, is that Tom Cruise is trying to like use IMAX as like this thing that brings people back to the movies, as like like bringing back movies that were like popular, you know, back in the day, or you know, this year. I think this year's the first time that they've done re-releases of like movies that are come out this year. We've previously seen that movies like, you know, The Matrix and Star Wars have been like featured. So now I think it's, you know, an innovative solution to be, you know, re-releasing movies that were popular this year. Because why not, you know, like
Yeah.
get
No,
people back to the movie theaters.
I think it's smart because it's funny when Sonia first brought this up, or like before, before we decided on today's topics, I was kind of like, wait, why is this significant? So
Yeah.
F1's in IMAX, like, yeah, that's the thing, IMAX.
Yeah.
But she pointed out that it's the first time that we're seeing that kind of re-release
Hmm.
where it's the same year. And now I'm realizing too, this is a great opportunity because August is a kind of a quiet, dead, kind of a quiet month. But you could also look at it as like, so everybody who kind of missed out the first time in
Hmm.
F1 is probably now like, "Oh, I wanted to see that." I'm like, "Oh, cool, it's gonna be in IMAX now." Like, wait, the kids are back in school at the end of the month.
Hmm.
Let's go to a lunchtime showing. You know, like you can
Yeah.
see like the consumer behavior where that makes total sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
with IMAX, right? Like you're when you buy an IMAX ticket, you're buying the IMAX experience.
Hmm.
So it makes sense where if that's the kind of experience you want, then it doesn't make sense for you to wait till it hits the streaming service.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're spot on saying that, you know, people that missed it the first go around, and I'm sure lots of, you know, repeats are people are going to go back. But you know, sometimes people need to hear that a movie is like really good before they'll actually go. So the fact that they're getting another chance to like go back is pretty cool. This also reminds me of we didn't talk about it because it happened I think the week you were gone, but what's happened with Christopher Nolan's next film, The Odyssey, where like AMC like basically sold out of like that IMAX screenings for the movie that's coming out in 2026 because people are like so excited about it. It's really, I think, showing that like IMAX has become its own like experience now, that like people want to go. It's not just about seeing the movie, it's about seeing it in IMAX as its own like, you know, separate thing. So I think the fact that, you know, the theaters that have it available, which isn't everywhere, that actually, you know, we do have to call that out, that it's only really in major cities that have like IMAX theaters because they have like, you know, the bigger theaters and stuff. Um, but maybe that's a thing that like as like movie theaters start thinking about the things that they can do to bring people back to the theater, it's doing this. It's like having the movies that people want to see you know, over and over again, and then also maybe calling back and bringing back some of the movies that have been popular in the past in order to try to bring people back to the theater.
Yeah, totally. And then our last line item here is Warner Brothers and Discovery is going to be splitting up. So effective 2026, WBD will be split into two separate publicly traded companies to sharpen their strategic focus. So streaming and studios will be with Warner Brothers. This unit will house Warner Brothers Film and TV Studios, HBO, Max, DC Studios, gaming, and all studio libraries. And and then all their legacy media is going to be going to Discovery Global. So this is going to include cable networks like CNN, TNT, Cartoon Network, Discovery, TNT Sports, Discovery Plus, and Bleacher Report. So yeah, they're going to also be reverting to the classic Warner Brothers name in terms of branding. And
Begging the
Discovery.
question, what was it all for? Like, I mean, we saw this obviously with HBO Max, and then I mean also with, you know, WB and Discovery. I just think about the millions wasted on the entire rebrand and all the assets that had to be created. Yeah, it's wild that like it's happening, but like maybe people will learn from this that you don't have to go through these crazy like rebrands in order to, you know, refresh your brand, and that sometimes the user and your customer is smart enough to understand what, you know, each of them mean, and that there's no need to bring everything together. It can all just be under like separate silos and people understand that, you know. I don't know. It kind of like brings to mind, like we were talking about Unilever earlier, right? Like imagine Unilever kind of just siloing everything to like all the soaps are just like one brand and all the shampoos are just one brand, you know, like it just seems so stupid, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess one thing I wonder is, well, you know, I assume this is more of just a kind of shareholder business decision, not so much a marketing decision. One thing though is I look forward to seeing what HBO will say on their social media. Maybe it'll be next year, but
Well, but it's not them, right?
no, but I was saying it because they're owned by Warner Brothers and HBO already had their
Hmm.
HBO Max. Wait, no, it's Max. Wait, no, now it's HBO. So now they might have an opportunity to be like, well, it's Warner Brothers, but now it's Discovery Global, and then wait, but we're Warner Brothers.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like those companies don't get or like aren't as well known. Maybe they bring the Animaniacs back for WB. That would
I
be
hope
a
so.
cool way
Yeah,
to, you know, bring it back, right? Because that's funny because now I think about like WB, I think like, you know, the Animaniacs, but then also like Space Jam are like very clearly the WB like sign. So that'd be interesting. But
yeah.
yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
I don't have high hopes for that. If we're being honest.
All right. Should we roll into key takeaways?
Yeah, let's do takeaways. Okay, so Sydney Sweeney and American Eagle. I think sometimes we have to not make mountains out of molehills. God, is that a boob joke? Anyway, point is, I don't think that it was meant to be about eugenics and white supremacy and all of that. But unfortunately, it was kind of rolled into that. So how do you as a brand kind of deal with it? I think that they're right in not acknowledging it because I don't think one way or the other they would get the response that they want, or they'd fall like on the positive side. This isn't quite like the astronomer controversy, which like there was clearly a right and a wrong or like intent behind it. So I think the way that they're handling it is the correct way. But then also I think there's so much to be said for like, you know, the people that are reacting to this, like why are people kind of jumping on top of it when we realize that it could even be bots that are trying to like, strum up all this controversy for no reason. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think one takeaway is, you know, when you're creating a new campaign or any of your marketing efforts, of course it is worth trying to look outside yourself and to look at the campaign, the messaging, you know, whatever the asset is, to look at it and try to see it from an outsider's perspective to figure out like, okay, what are our blind spots? Does this come off wrong in some way? What are some of the consequences we might see as a result of this? Like, I think it's absolutely worth trying to think outside yourself and look at that kind of thing. But at the same time, you can't let that paralyze your actions, in that you still have to make decisions, you still have to move forward with things. I don't know if obviously we don't know if American Eagle's team had these internal conversations. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but worth considering that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that was my big takeaway there.
Yeah, I don't know. Part of me is like, I don't want to live in a world where I have to think about every possible angle of what can be misconstrued and what could be like, seen negatively. But on the flip side, that's kind of where we're at right now. And the fact that people were willing to jump on top of this and kind of see the, you know, relation there means that you're gonna kind of have to deal with it, which sucks. So yeah, agree with Amanda that you need to, try to view it from as many angles as possible. But here's the thing, right? Where it's like having that diversity in like opinion within your own team makes that easier to be able to
Yes.
see one way or the other. So,
Yes. 100%. All right, our next story on getting mentioned in the AI overviews and ChatGPT. Yeah, I mean, big takeaway is PR is super important, friends. We in today's, in modern marketing now, we are seeing that we're coming full circle with the classic marketing functions. So make sure your PR machine is well oiled and you are taking advantage of the opportunities in niche and trade publications so that one day you too will also be mentioned in ChatGPT or the AI overview.
Yeah, my takeaway is now is the time for you to focus on thought leadership and content creation in terms of like what is most unique to you, to your company, to your like founder insight, like your customer stories, like how your customer is uniquely using your product, like everything that is unique to you that can only be said about you and your product and company is now is the time to write that all up, go on podcasts and talk about it, make sure that the transcript is easily accessible online and get that content out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So marketing topic number 3, about AI skill gaps. Basically, if you're like a junior marketer or you're thinking about getting into marketing, start figuring out how you can use AI to as a tool or a process for the way that you're creating your work. It's not going to be, for everything. And as Amanda mentioned earlier, you should definitely learn how to write and like learn taste, how to make connections, because AI isn't going to be able to do that. So how are you incorporating it into what makes you human and like what, connections you're making? Yeah, go learn AI for like, some of the processes that you're learning.
Yeah, and hone the skills that AI is like unlikely to replace so that you can then leverage AI tools to your advantage. So be irreplaceable in your skills and your capabilities while also figuring out how to make yourself better or more scalable through some of these through this technology.
Yeah. And then for our nostalgia marketing roundup, I guess as a company, just like how can you kind of make those references? I mean, I think part of what is also, nostalgia here was the Sydney Sweeney ad, right? Calling back the, Calvin Klein and Brooke Shields commercial and ad. That's part of like what I think American Eagle was trying to like bring up. It was controversial here, but like, as a company, if, it still like worked, right? It still got them a lot of views. Their stock went up and all that. So I think the intent of it, like of like bringing up nostalgia and like what references you could do to kind of tie it back to like your company, that's still like a takeaway that I think is like super important. Like, how can you kind of like talk about that in that way? Also, like we can throw in the Gwyneth Paltrow and Astronomer ad where it's like calling back to Gwyneth Paltrow's relationship to Coldplay's Chris Martin and their unconscious uncoupling. Sorry, their conscious uncoupling. That's all just like nostalgia and all these like references, right? And we've talked about that, like how meme culture kind of works in terms of bringing up nostalgia for like people to like, remember those references. So how is it that your company can kind of, tie into things that are already like shared culture?
Yeah, I think shared culture is a great point. Maybe what I'll also call out in this is when we think about nostalgia marketing at the moment, who is it for? And it's looking like it's largely for elder millennials and maybe younger Gen Xers. But what that tells me as a marketer is that I think at this moment in time, it's the elder millennials and Gen Xers who are the ones with the most spending power
Mhm.
at the time. That's my hunch, right? So maybe it's sure you can do nostalgia marketing as in what you're doing, but it's also just, continue to figure out who your audience really is, who your most valuable audience is, and how do you speak their language, share in their cultural moments, and really get on their level.
Agree. But I think that also it's nostalgia for millennials and Gen Xers now, but what will that nostalgia be for Gen Zers, right? Like part of kind of learning the culture now, the shared culture, is that eventually all those references are probably going to make a comeback, right? So what are you learning about, your industry that can then, call back to those things later? Because eventually, when Gen Z does have that, spending power, and that culture, supremacy, you'll probably still be working, right? You'll probably still be in marketing, so you might be able to like reference those things too. So I think it just speaks to how much you should be curious about like, what people are talking about, I mean, I guess another point for being online all the time is like learning what people are talking about, and that gives us that like shared culture and like the viral memes that like people are talking about. So educate yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And with that, continue to educate yourself by subscribing to Meme Team. You can follow the pod on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And yeah, and with that, if you like this episode, please leave us a positive review. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.